Has your Home Assistant Yellow ever gotten what I call the red LED of death? Or has it ever gone down and stopped responding and you can't access it in the web browser? A dead Home Assistant Yellow can be super frustrating. But before you give up, let's go through a few things that might bring it back to life. Step number 1, basic troubleshooting. First, we're going to check to make sure all of the hardware is installed correctly. Go ahead and open up the lid, and we're going to take a look at the board real quick. If you'll notice, the NVMe SSD is screwed in correctly, and it's plugged in properly, so that looks good. The compute module has the heatsink screwed in tightly, and it's flush with the board, so that looks good too. Let's go ahead and pack it up and look for another sanity check. Next, we want to make sure that everything is plugged in correctly. Sounds dumb, but you never know what might have slipped out or someone tripped over it or something like that and then made your Home Assistant Yellow unresponsive. Access that or attempt to access the IP address one last time in a web browser. That's not responding. So you can go to the start menu and open up a command prompt and type ping and then type your Home Assistant Yellow IP address. Mine's 10.10.10.40, but that's not responsive there either. So it looks like all of our basic sanity checks have failed. To connect to our Home Assistant Yellow via serial port, we first need to download Raspberry Pi compute module drivers. That's accomplished by downloading this exe setup and running it on your computer. So let's do that real quick before we get started. Go ahead and launch the RPi boot setup and go through the setup steps. You can just click next and agree. It installs one small thing. If this installing drivers window pops up on the side, that's totally fine. You can leave it there. That's supposed to happen. Once it's finished, you should see completed down there at the bottom of the log. So you can just go ahead and click next and finish to get rid of that message. So let's go ahead and hook up our Home Assistant Yellow via USB to our computer. Download PuTTY. So go ahead and download that client. It will let you connect to any system, and that's what we need to use here. So open it up. The first thing we need to do is a little detective work. So go ahead and open up Device Manager, and you're going to want to go to the Ports menu, and you'll want to see the Silicon Labs blah 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 entry, and you see that COM4. You want to remember that. That's important. We're going to take COM4. We're going to go back to PuTTY. We're going to click on the serial radio button. We're going to type in COM4 here. And then we'll change the speed to 115/200, and then that's all we need to configure. So we can then click open, and it will connect to the Home Assistant Yellow via serial port. Now, if you see a blank screen here, that's totally fine. Serial ports do that sometimes. So if you can just enter a couple times, that'll show you the login prompt, as you can see there. Now, to log in, type the word root and then hit enter, and you'll be dropped onto the Home Assistant command line. Run this command to go to where all of your automations and other settings are, and hit enter. Then you'll want to type this command to show all the files. Once you see the files, you can type this command to print the contents of a file to the screen. My configuration is kind of empty for this demo, so it doesn't show anything, but yours will definitely have a lot more to show. And you can do the same thing with automations or the Home Assistant log to try to troubleshoot why your Home Assistant doesn't respond. I'm printing the log to the screen here, but you probably won't need to do that. You can just run this command to try to restart your Home Assistant and see if that works. Step number 2, factory reset. Okay, so nothing else has worked so far and it's still not working. So we're going to have to try something a little more destructive this time around and factory reset the Home Assistant Yellow. There are 2 buttons on the back. There's a blue button and a red button. The blue button doesn't actually do anything. You can press it and nothing will happen. The developers added it there just in case they wanted to use it, but they never got around to it. The red button, on the other hand, does have a purpose, and that is to factory reset the unit when it's pressed for a few seconds. So that's what we're going to go ahead and try. So make sure your Home Assistant Yellow has networking plugged in. We're going to need something small to press the red button with. I've got a paperclip and a SIM card removal tool. I'm going to use the SIM card removal tool because it's easier for me. Now, make sure the power is unplugged. Then we're going to take the SIM card removal tool or the paperclip, and we're going to press and hold the red button for a few moments while we then plug in the power. The red and green light are going to turn on. After a few seconds, the yellow light will turn on solid. Once it does that, you can release the reset button and the Home Assistant Yellow will download the latest operating system version. Once the system comes back up, you'll see this welcome screen. This will look familiar if you set up Home Assistant Yellow with my previous video, but if you haven't, this is what the intro screen looks like, and so you can set up your home from here. Step number 3, USB-C recovery. Final method we're going to try is to use the USB-C recovery mode that's built onto the Home Assistant Yellow. You can see there's a little button on the board called USB-C recovery. That's the button we're going to be pressing after we hook it up to our computer in order to use the Raspberry Pi Restoration RPi boot application. So we need to move a jumper on the board first before we do any of that. So take that little jumper and move it from the left and middle pin and put it on the middle and right pin instead. That way we'll switch to the USB mode for that port. Make sure you push it all the way down so that way it covers both pins on the board. Go ahead and hook up your Home Assistant Yellow to your computer like I have shown in the picture. After you do that and that USB cable is connected, make sure you disconnect the power and press the USB-C recovery button and keep it held down. You will then take the power cable, plug it into the board, and once you do that, you'll then release the USB-C recovery button. The red light will stay on, but no other light will be on. To install Home Assistant, you want to use the RPi boot CM4 mass storage gadget option in your start menu. It's also under this shortcut location in your app data folder. You can go ahead and click the mass storage data script. It will load this command prompt and start to install Home Assistant onto the Home Assistant Yellow. You'll notice that the LED next to the red LED is blinking. That's the green LED, and that will blink periodically to indicate that it's being installed. After that's finished, you should see that second stage boot server done option there on the log. That means that Home Assistant has been installed on the Yellow, and the files will pop up here showing all of the Home Assistant files. This means it's installed correctly. So before we pack this back up and start using it, let's make sure to put the jumper back on to the left and middle pins on the board. And there you have it, a brand new Home Assistant installation from recovery mode. So what do you think? Besides just reinstalling on the SSD, is there any easier way to reinstall Home Assistant? Let me know in the comments if you run into any issues resetting your Home Assistant Yellow. And check out this video if you're looking for how to set up and install Home Assistant Yellow. I'll see you in the next one.